Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
So good morning, Adrianna.
Hi,
It's
Doug.
super cool to have you here this morning. I've got Adrianna Stephenson here, and she has an incredible story about her son and cancer and stuff. So why don't you just introduce yourself and then tell us your story?
Absolutely. My name is Adrianna Stephenson. I live in Dallas, Texas with my family. I am the mom to two little boys, Parker and Drew. My oldest son, Parker, he is 5 now. In July of 2016, when he was 19 months old, he was diagnosed with a large, like almost golf ball size brain tumor called a pilocytic astrocytoma in and around the hypothalamus, so a really central part of the brain. And he had a subtotal resection at the time. The location made a full resection impossible. And about 3 months post-op, the tumor had almost grown back to its original size. And so he had just turned 2. And chemotherapy was our only option. At the time, our neurosurgeon would not do more surgery, and frankly, we didn't want him to do more surgery either, just the risks at that time. So a week after he turned 2, he started a trio of chemotherapy drugs, carboplatin, vincristine, and temozolomide, and it's a year and a half, 18-month protocol. And about 3.5 months into his chemo journey, I started him on a therapeutic ketogenic diet. And that, coupled with the chemo, was an amazing combination, frankly. And the next MRI after starting him on keto, and not just like lazy keto, like a strict therapeutic ketogenic diet, all post-surgical edema resolved. The tumor was 30% smaller, and every single subsequent MRI after that, the tumor shrunk to nothing. And he's been considered NED, which is no evidence of disease, since December of 2018. And his brain looks great. His last scan was last June, and our neurosurgeon wanted us to go to annual scans, which is really hard when you've been used to 3-month scans.
Yeah.
And then 6 scans. That's a lot of faith to have to go for a year. And actually, we had moved it up to April, so next month, which would be 10 months. But now how the universe works, I'm sure they're going to push us to June, which was what our neurosurgeon wanted, because he is doing wonderfully. We're not seeing any outward signs that there's tumor growth or anything like that. And we've kept him on a ketogenic diet ever since. I've loosened up a little bit with a lot more protein, because he's young and growing, and he's so metabolically flexible now, because when you train the body when they're 2 years old, they don't have decades of metabolic damage either, right? So, but he's done amazing. And we have another little boy. He's got a little brother who is also I'd call him a low carb kid, not a keto kid, totally. But they thrive on it. So that's kind of our story in a nutshell.
So tell me the type of tumor that he had again.
Sure. It's called a pilocytic astrocytoma. It is a type of glioma. It is the lowest grade of glioma, and it's very well circumscribed. So it really looks like when it lights up on the MRI image, it looks like a giant white circle. That's what it looked like. So the good news was that it wasn't a diffuse tumor, so it wasn't like shrapnel in the brain. We knew the exact kind of confines of it. And so that was really good news. The other thing is we did have the tumor sample from surgery genetically tested, because there's really a shameful lack of research for pediatric cancers in general. I mean, less than 4% of the total national budget for cancer research goes to all pediatric cancers, less than 4%. So you can imagine out of that 4%, the percentage that brain tumors get. And then from there, there are over 100 different types of pediatric brain tumors. So, I mean, we're just up against almost insurmountable odds. So the more you can know about your child's tumor or your type of cancer, whatever genetic components are in there, the better off you are. And so there are, we found out that his tumor has what about 80% of these JPA, so juvenile pilocytic astrocytoma, JPA tumors have, is something called a BRAF mutation. So it's the BRAF 1549 KIAA fusion. And that we actually know exactly on that cell development cycle, exactly what part goes wrong, where basically the gas pedal was stuck in the on position to keep replicating those glial cells. And the reason that's so important is that they found that there's a BRAF mutation in many adult melanomas, and there's a lot more money in research with adult melanomas than pediatric brain tumors. But what that means is that there are new clinical trials going on with these MEK inhibitor drugs, which exactly target these BRAF genes. And so ultimately down the line, it opens up more treatment options for us should he need it that's not chemotherapy. So there's no true silver bullet there. You just want to have a lot of different options in your back pocket. And ultimately for us, a therapeutic ketogenic diet was part of a greater plan of how we treated him, and a really important component. So I call, those adjunctive therapies, right? Those complementary therapies that really ultimately synergistically worked together.
Yeah, I actually just finished editing yesterday a podcast that I did with Lewis Cantley.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with him, but incredible research that he's doing there with PI3 kinase inhibitors. And
Yes.
The problem with that is that the glucose goes, it's a South African word, but goes mushuga, which is kind of, but it goes crazy. And the only way that they tried metformin, which sometimes works okay,
Right.
but when they combined it with a ketogenic diet, it was spectacular.
Yeah.
And in all the research they were doing, at least in the mouse models to start with, there wasn't one single tumor that didn't respond.
Right.
And now they're doing a bunch of human trials and stuff as well, especially for women's cancers. And it's the only thing that I was a bit disappointed in when I spoke to him about glioblastomas was that the PI3 kinase inhibitor that at least the ones that they have currently, weren't able to get into the brain. Right. And so in terms of that inhibitor being effective for glios, it wasn't. Right. But they're working on trying to find one that does pass that brain barrier so that it can get in. And that'll be even more effective, which is really exciting. Well, so tell me, is your story just about your son, or are you helping other parents to understand how this can help them? What are you
Absolutely.
What are you doing?
So my background, I'm an academic research librarian in the humanities. So I never thought that I'd trade, studying 16th century Italian drawings to talking about tumor biology. But that's my background. I did take 2 years off when he was in chemo, and I was also pregnant during that time. But after he finished treatment, I first, part of our story is I became very involved with a nonprofit based in Southern California called the Max Love Project. And it is a nonprofit that supports childhood cancer families with kind of the whole child's looking at the whole child. So not just food, and they're huge proponents of the ketogenic diet, but also looking at sleep and social interaction and just, everything that makes us healthy humans, and everything that the couple that started it, he has a research background. He's got, he works at the University of UC Irvine, and everything that they put out is evidence-based. And that really spoke to my research background, because I didn't want just a bunch of woo. I wanted to be able to go to our oncologists with, frankly, I came with an annotated bibliography of research that I handed them when we started Parker on keto. And so from there, my involvement with Max Love Project grew, where I'm one of their pilot group of mama mentors. So just helping, because I actually found out about keto from another mom on a Facebook group, not from my clinicians. And so, it was really important to me to be part of that chain, to start paying it forward again, because it's incredibly overwhelming when your child is diagnosed with something like a brain tumor. And then not everybody has the tools or the skills to be able to do the research like I did. And so I'm one of their mama mentors. I also do their ketogenic programming on their social media, because I started about 2 years ago an Instagram page called Keto for My Kid, just kind of documenting our journey. And from there, it's grown, where I've had parents from all over the world truly private message me, contact me, because they were scouring the ends of the internet to try to find somebody who had the same story, right? Or the same type of tumor, anything. I mean, these parents are absolutely desperate. And so that's been the most rewarding part to me, to be able to have kind of a platform to be able to share what we did, share the research, be encouraging, and still be, excuse me, sorry, my phone, and still be real about what it actually takes to get a child to eat a ketogenic diet. And so from there, the network has just grown, and I am now, friends with parents that use it for not just cancer, but for epilepsy and other medical conditions. So
Other conditions
that's
as well.
that's part of my bigger master plan, is to just use our story as a vehicle to help as many families as possible, because I truly, from the depths of my soul, know that it was keto in conjunction with standard of care that ultimately saved his life.
Yeah. Oh, just remind me her name again, Max's mom?
Audra Wilford.
Audra. So she actually spoke at our event a couple of years ago.
Okay. She's a very dear friend of mine.
Yeah. So we actually then got Max up on the stage after her talk and everything. So
yeah,
that was pretty cool. So I'm really pleased to see that, that you're involved with that. I didn't realize when you contacted me that you were involved with the Max Love Project. That's pretty exciting. I love that crowd, and I love what they've been doing.
Yeah, I'm building an Instagram page for them called Max Love Keto, and the way we're envisioning it is kind of in a different way. It's not really static, but we have like a base set of image tiles that have information behind them, and it's basically a keto 101 for parents of questions, but it's really it's been a great exercise for me, because I have to condense everything down to what can I get in these tiles to be able to help parents. So that's one of the projects I'm working with them on, that I'm spearheading right now.
You were saying that for these conditions like epilepsy, cancer, obviously a bunch of other conditions, for children as well now, we're seeing that it is very effective. Mm-hmm. But my big thing is it's really good for everybody else too.
Yeah.
I think that, I think it's almost like a cop-out, because because of the naysayers and everything. It's like, oh, keto is not for everybody. I think that's bullshit, to be honest with you.
I agree.
I think outside of maybe one or two mega outliers, everybody would be better off, in my opinion, on keto. for me, first prize is to get all these kids on keto, the ones that are not sick, so that they don't get sick.
Right.
Why do we have to get sick before we realize, oh, we should change what we're eating and fix it? Why don't we just fix it in the beginning and just not get sick? So I know that's a long way down the road, but the more people that come to our conferences, youngsters especially, where they're not sick, they're not like me that was developing insulin resistance and putting on weight and also respiratory issues and all of these things. They're not like that yet. They're like I was when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, you know. But they get, somehow they get it, and they realize, and they've adopted this lifestyle, and they're loving it, just so that they stay healthy. And for me, that's first prize. That's what I'm after.
I would love to just piggyback on that a little bit. I completely agree. And just to share a little bit about our family's journey, it was really important to me when I finally took that leap of faith to start Parker on a therapeutic ketogenic diet. When it was scary at first. In retrospect, I think it was just food. But when you have a 2-year-old in chemotherapy, he's pre-verbal. I didn't want to do anything else to harm him. And we're fed so much misinformation about food that it truly was a leap of faith for me to do that. But one of the things that I told my husband and my mom, because she lives with us as well, is that this is going to be a family affair. I don't want to give him a complex about food. I don't want to give him food issues. I want this to be, this is just how our family eats. And in retrospect, that was the best thing I could have done, because I had already been on a real food quest for many, many years. And so we didn't have a lot of junk in our house. We weren't coming from what they call a SAD diet, right? That standard American diet. We weren't coming from there, but we had carbohydrates in our pantry, and I got rid of all of it. And that was the best thing I could have done, because it truly forced all of us into not just supporting Parker, but supporting ourselves as well. And I was pregnant during the first 9 months. I found out I was pregnant 3 days after he started chemo. Surprise. And so I had to take care of my body as well. And that's one of the reasons I say I really am a real food crusader as well, because the way we've approached a ketogenic diet is primarily with real food. And that's how we cook in our house. I love to show families that you can eat this way and it doesn't have to be crazy expensive. Everybody can enjoy it. You can eat vegetables, you can eat fruit, you can do other things. It's not just, American cheese and bacon to get through this. But that's ultimately my hope with how we're raising our sons, is that this is just a normal way to eat. This is the way we're designed to eat. This is what makes our bodies and our brains feel good. And that's kind of the conversations we have around it. I mean, they're 2.5 and 5, but Parker is now at an age where he's asking more questions about food. And we talk a lot about what foods nourish our brain and nourish our body, and why some people eat other foods that we don't eat, and just having those kind of open conversations. But luckily for him, this is all he's known. So, and my younger son too.
No, that's magic. I love the way that's going. I really do.
It's harder for the adults.
So in terms of doing keto with kids, like we were talking about, I would love for all kids to be eating that way, but obviously we start out with the sick kids. So just tell me a little bit about what that looks like. What does keto for kids look like? How do you get your kids to do it?
Sure. So for us at the very beginning, I offered the same foods on repeat. I also had a child in chemo whose appetite was diminished. And so I really wanted to focus on nutrient density, because that was one of the criticisms that I had read, that this wasn't a nutrient dense way for kids to eat. And so we primarily focused on pastured butter, eggs, grass-fed meat, avocado, coconut, broccoli. I mean, we truly focused on nutrient-dense foods. I have a cream cheese pancake recipe that I probably have made 10,000 batches of. Scrambled eggs. There were some days in chemo he would eat 6 or 7 eggs in Kerrygold butter, and that was it. And I knew in my heart that I was giving him the best nutrition possible. So keeping it simple, offering real nutrient-dense foods is really important, especially at the beginning when you're also transitioning their taste buds, to be honest. But the other thing that I tell families is that if you are using keto for medical reasons, you have, to me, a non-negotiable part is blood testing. And that means your glucose as well as your ketones. And people are really hesitant to want to get a meter to read their children's, to read what's going on with their blood. But to me, that is the absolute keystone to figuring out how food affects your body. And so, from day one, we used a blood meter. And at the beginning, to be honest, we tested him 3 or 4 times a day because we had to know how the food was affecting him, how the chemo was affecting him. And from there, it's weaned down that now we only do it almost every other day because I know his body so well. I know I can almost predict what it's going to be, but it also is a great marker for, I could almost tell when he's getting sick because his glucose will be elevated and I'll think, that's a little strange that he's been eating right on plan and everything's on target. And sure enough, the next day he gets a fever. It's really interesting to see how that works. But I've worked really hard to de-escalate the trauma that comes with a blood poke. And the way we did that is that our house rule was whenever Parker got poked, mommy got poked too. And so it was a way for him to have a small bit of control in something that ultimately wasn't in his control at all. And so now I have lancets that are different colors and he picks the finger and it's something that he and I do together. And that's been a really crucial part of this journey that is a tool that you have to have if you are serious about using this for medical conditions. And I think almost every other parent that I've met in this space that uses it for therapeutic reasons would agree and do the same. So, and the bonus is I've learned a lot about myself in the last 3 years too. So,
yeah. And I mean, what's encouraging is that CGMs are becoming more and more prevalent and a lot cheaper and stuff.
Right.
So, and that, if you're able to use those, first of all, you can check as many times as you want every day.
Right.
But the other thing is that it's less intrusive because you're not getting that finger prick thing.
Absolutely.
That you have to get over all the time.
And people get really hung up on the ketones that are reading. And I tell them ketones are important, but they're only as important in relationship to what your glucose level is.
Sure,
too.
exactly.
And trying to really help people paint that picture. And so I try to educate people on that GKI, on that glucose ketone index, because especially if you are in active treatment, it's really important that you try to get that GKI number below a 1 if you're going into radiation or going into chemotherapy. So.
Okay, yeah, well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us and telling us this story. We've been talking about trying to get you to our event in San Diego if the chaos dies down and
Yes.
and it does actually happen, but it will happen at some point. Whenever it does, we'd love to get you in, maybe get you in a breakout talk or something like that where people with kids or have concerns like that can come and listen to you tell your story. And give other parents hope. I think that's the crux of your story, I think.
And that's the thing is that in an impossible situation, the food you feed your children and the atmosphere you cultivate in your home, that is something you can control. So
yeah, awesome message. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to an episode of the LowCarbUSA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/LowCarbUSA.